Hey everybody, Andy from Tennis Euphoria bringing you a short review, some thoughts really on the Head Extreme MP Auxetic 2022. A little bit late to the party with this one, I know, it's been out for a little while, but I get asked about it a lot. I reviewed the previous iteration and this one is a little bit different to its predecessor, and I think it's worth talking about a little because it could appeal to a slightly wider spectrum of player and has subtly different characteristics now, which is worth mentioning if you're potentially thinking about buying this racket or in the market for something similar to it. So the Extreme line is Head's spin line. The MP has always been 300 grams, 16 by 19 string pattern. I've always liked the beam tapering off at 21, so it's the same mold. We've got Auxetic in the layup now. Spin grommets remain, you get a lot of movement in Head spin grommets, and I would say that in terms of broad characteristics, it tends to be with the Extreme line that they're more comfortable than their direct competitors. Babolat Pure Aero, Dunlop SX lines, both yellowish rackets historically, but you could also include, of course, the Yonex V-Core 100 as a competitor as well. I think the comfort still remains. Broadly speaking, the characteristics are still a racket that is powerful, spin friendly, high launch angle, lots of cut down on the ball, and when you're hitting at 50 to 60%, it does very much feel like it has those characteristics retained. Mine came in at 335 grams strung, 323 grams on the swing weight. I had a leather grip, an over grip, Luxlon Adrenaline through most of the time with it at 52 pounds. Now the Extreme line and the MP has always been fast through the air, stable for its weight, and I think this iteration has an improvement in terms of control and directional targeting. I'll explain why I think that is the case soon, and I'm trying to demonstrate that with a few videos here. I think you can actually play quite cutely, quite aggressively, and hit your targets in an all-court sort of fashion with this Extreme MP, which might not be your initial sort of thoughts of a power and spin racket, but that is the case here. I also find that with the Extreme MP over the last few iterations, actually you can hit a nice slice, but that is improved with this. They've changed the drill pattern, and it's hard to see from that picture, but compared to the last, you have both the mains and the crosses around the sweet spot and the sort of middle of the racket that is denser and closer together, still a 16 by 19, and the slice is greatly improved. I think the launch angle is a little bit less extreme, still plenty of spin on offer, but probably a little bit less spin. Don't have anything to measure that, but I'm pretty sure I'll be getting a little bit less spin compared to the previous iteration. But what comes with that then, of course, is more control, and I always define control around length and depth, and judgment of length and depth, and it's better controlled than its predecessor. And the other thing that I think is worth noting is that certainly I'm not a huge spin player. Occasionally I like to hit out and flatten out a shot and play aggressively, and I thought that this iteration is much better than the previous. If you want to do that, you have a lot more confidence when you're flattening the ball out to hit your targets. So that should be, you know, a fairly positive improvement for most players. Of course, if you're someone who's less concerned with pinpoint precision and more concerned with the damage that you can do from the back of the court, hitting big targets with huge amounts of spin, then you might still prefer the previous iteration. And I also noticed that whereas the previous iteration was one of the best rackets I've ever hit for second serve kick, I think you get a little bit less from this version. Other things worth noting, I'd be interested to see if anyone's hit with the previous Pro edition. This, for me, plays exactly like that previous Pro edition. So the previous Pro was 310 grams target weight, so if you're getting them on spec, it would have been 10 grams heavier than the MP. And it had a drill pattern that I'm pretty confident would be exactly the same as this MP now, a little bit sort of tighter in the spacing in the middle, so it felt more controlled and it felt a little bit more stable than the previous MP. Now the drill pattern I think now is the same, so you have that sort of directional control, but also One thing that I do think Auxetic does to the head rackets is subtly improve stability and possibly widen the sweet spot a little. So those things combined, I actually think if you're someone who's playing or have been playing with the previous edition Pro, it'll be a really easy transition to this MP, and you might benefit from a little bit more racket head speed from a slightly lighter static weight. If you're someone who's in love with the previous MP, then I think you should hit this side by side, because I do think you are losing a little bit of raw spin for better control, better ability to be creative, still stable at net, which is good. So some subtle changes in terms of I mentioned a wider spectrum of potential customer for this Extreme MP. Then I think people who are looking at the Extreme Tour should actually now look at the Extreme MP2. I would imagine that most people looking at the Extreme Tour racket that I've reviewed would be interested in some assurance in lift over the net, some spin, some power, but ultimately probably like to play aggressively, like to play all court, and so ultimately are looking for, you know, a kind of modern hybrid racket, something with a bit of control. The improved control here means that this would compete quite well with the Extreme Tour, and the Extreme Tour in the current edition, as with the previous, needs a bit of customization. Don't think you really need customization on this MP, to be honest. For a 300 gram racket, it's pretty stable. I'm carrying a couple of niggles at the moment, hip, back, so I'm a little bit impeded in movement, definitely impeded in serve action, but the other thing I would guess is that fully fit when I was hitting the previous Extreme MP, I think I was probably getting a little bit more on serve, mainly because of that string pattern change, I suspect, but still this is a serve monster in the right hands. So subtle changes, you know, excellent racket. Individual thing, isn't it? Paint jobs, but I'd love to see a night edition come out of this. I think for people who are a bit more conservative and less likely to use Larry colours would go for that Extreme Night. And this is now a racket that you definitely should consider if you're after power and spin, lots of baseline action, but also if you're someone who likes to flatten it out, mix it up, it's also a racket you should probably demo too. So in terms of the catalogue coming up, exciting time for new racket releases coming out, isn't it? I'm really excited to have the Dunlop FX Tour, the Jack Draper edition. I'm also going to try a new string with that, Dunlop Explosive. I'm really excited by that racket. The previous was very good and this is softer. I've got hold of the Aero 98 and I also have the V-Core 98. Hope to get the 95 or 100. So if you'd like to see those, subscribe to the channel and I'll see you soon.